friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using the brand new Little Star stamp set from Hello Bluebird. So I've already made one card using this set for our new release sneak peeks, and it was a boy version. So I thought for today I would do a girl version since I didn't film this first one. I just made it over a couple of days when I had some time to color and then create the card. So we're going to be making these nearly identical, just this one will be in shades of pink for certain aspects of the card, but the majority of the images, like the elephant, the bunny, and the moon, are all going to be exactly the same as in the boy version. So I'm starting with my elephant, and I'm coloring that with my Copic markers using W00, W1, and W3. And by the way, those images were stamped as usual with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink on Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock, which is my favorite cardstock for Copic coloring. So I'm taking that W3 and laying in some shadows wherever I think that they should go. This is a nighttime scene, so I am adding some fairly heavy shadows, although I do want the image to stay light since this is a baby card. So I'm blending out that W3 with the W1 and just softening up the edge of that, still leaving the majority of space for that W00. Having a really wide area for the highlight is going to really help keep this image light so I don't get too heavy-handed with it. So now I'm going to come in with that W00 and just fill in any remaining white space, making sure to go over the edge of that W1 and pull it into that highlighted area so that I get a nice smooth blend. I don't want to have any harsh lines on there, especially for a really soft coloring image. So once I have that completely blended out, I am going to go back and do a second layer. This just helps smooth things out and beefs up the saturation a little bit more, gives you a bit more contrast, which is something I really like in my coloring. And it's super easy to do. You just go right over the areas that you've already colored using the same exact shades and just lay in that second layer. I'm doing my shadow on the front ear a little bit different. I'm adding that shadow kind of in the center of the ear in a small triangle. And what that's doing is helping the edges of that ear to look like they're a little bit more raised. It just makes the ear look a little bit floppy, which I think is super cute, especially for a baby card. So I'm going to continue blending with all of those shades. Now on the first card, the boy version, I did actually only do one layer of each of the colors. That's because I was just kind of testing things out. That was the very first image that I colored from the new release, and it was late at night, so I was kind of just hurrying through it, but then it ended up being super cute and I decided to turn it into a card. Originally, I wasn't even sure if I was going to turn it into a card. By the way, I'm using W5 to go over the little toenails, and then I'm going to add some dot detail to just give this little elephant some more personality. I'm going to do that with the W5 and the W3. So later on, when you see the cards side by side, you'll notice the difference in the saturation. The girl version is going to be a little bit more saturated than the boy version, and also the lines were only stamped once on the boy version and twice on the girl version using my Misty. So you'll likely notice a difference in the lines as well. So I'm moving on to the bunny using the same combo that I did on the boy version, which is E50 and E51. Just laying in a bit of that E51 for some shading first, and then I'm going to come in and flick that color toward the center with that E50 and just soften things and leave a little bit of white area on there as well for some little white patches. And then I'll go over that with a second layer as well. So in the boy version, the bunny does look a little bit lighter, and that's because, like I said, there's only one layer of that coloring on there. So I'm going to blend out that, and then I'm going to let that dry for a bit maybe like 30 seconds to a minute. And then I want to add some dot detail to the bunny as well. But while I'm waiting for that to dry, I'm going to do the tail going back to my W1 and W3. I forgot to do it when I had those colors already out. So for the dot detail on the bunny, I wanted to darken it just slightly. So I'm adding in E53 along with the E51. And I mainly just do those dots on the outer areas of the body, wherever the deepest shading is. Next, I wanted to give these critters some rosy cheeks, so I'm pulling out my go-to combo, which is R000, R11, and R20. Sometimes I don't use the R000, I leave that one off, but when the images are lighter colored, I definitely add it in. And since these are in this case, it really does help to just smooth that pink blush into the rest of the skin tone or fur tone. I used the R20 to fill in the little bunny's nose and added a touch of the R000 into the ears. And then that little space of sky between the ears, I'm going to color with those shades as well because I am going to be doing a pink sky on the girl version. I'm also going to color the cloud to be pink so that it's kind of reflecting the sky around it, just like I did with the boy one with the blues. So I'm starting with my lightest shade this time because I want to build up that color, keep it nice and fluffy and soft. So I didn't want to go in too hard with the darkest color right off the bat. So I'm using that R000 once again and kind of just outlining the artist drawn lines there where there's little dips and curves in the cloud. And then I'm going to come in with that R11 and start to lay in some shadows. I'm going to deepen those up in places, especially around where the elephant is laying, since it would be, you know, a heavier animal. It would kind of indent a little bit more and have a bit more shadow around it. So I'm just doing that with the R11. And then I am going to also add the R11 to the outside edges, just using a much thinner line this time. I'm making it a little bit deeper wherever the scallops of that cloud are, just to kind of reinforce those. And then I'm going to go back to that R000 and really blend that out and make sure that everything is really nice and soft again, because I want that to look really like filmy and gauzy like a cloud does. So the R000 is light enough that once it dries back, it really fades nicely into the white. But if you were using maybe a different shade, if you don't have the R000, maybe use the R00 or even the R01. You can always help it along by just going over the edge with your colorless blender and letting that kind of help fade it into the white space. But I didn't feel it was necessary for this card. So now I'm coming in with that R20 and just adding a little bit of shading. I'm doing some dot detail with that wherever those deepest, darkest spaces are, especially concentrating like in those little upsweeps of that cloud are, and in any of the like deeper shadows and creases as well, just going over that. I thought it would be fun to just keep that consistent across the board for today, having that little bit of dot detail in there. And then I'm blending that out with the R11, just kind of softening it a bit. I didn't want it to be quite so prominent, so just adding a bit of that to knock it back a tiny bit more. And then I will also go back to that R000 one more time and just make sure that everything is softly blended where it fades into that white space. So all along those outside edges and then also all around that little elephant. For the bird, I wanted to go with some brighter, more fuchsia toned pinks. So I chose RV23, RV25, and RV29, and I'm using that RV29 first along the back of the body and on the wing and the tail, and then blending up with the RV25, And then I'll use the RV23 to fill in most of the rest of the body. Although I decided that I wanted a bit more of that salmony type pink also included on the bird. So I am going to, well, I'm going to do a second layer, but I am going to add in the RV11 in there as well. Just like I said, I wanted to pull in a little bit of the color from the cloud. So I'm keeping in mind the shades that I'm going to be using in the background, the Distress Oxides that I'll be using. So I just wanted to kind of tie in those colors with the bird. For the beak, I'm going to go back to my W5 and just fill that in solid. And then I'm going to come back in with the darkest two shades of those fuchsia pinks and add some dot detail on the bird as well. Then I'm going to jump over to the moon, and for that I'm using Y00, Y000, and Y02. And I'm going to shade that on the bottom part of the inside of the moon and then on the upper part of the outside of the moon. I was just trying something different, and then I'm going to blend that out with the Y000. And there's a big step between these shades. I probably need to get the Y01 or the Y00 to create a little bit of a smoother blend, but it worked. And then I'm going to fill in the center with the Y000. I'm going to skip the stars for this card. I ended up changing my mind and using a die for the starry background. We'll get to that in just a little bit. But I will use those stars, I'm sure, in another video because there are just so many adorable baby themed images in this release that I just can't wait to color up. So I'm sure I'll use them before too long. So I'm blending all of that moon out, and then I'm going to add my dot detail using Y02 and Y08. I just wanted something that was a little bit darker and more vibrant so that it would show up. So I went in with the Y08 first, and then I'm going with the Y02 kind of between and even over some of the other ones sometimes, just to help soften them and integrate them into the rest. And then I'm going to trim these images out with their matching dies. For the background, I'm going to take a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock, and I'm going to ink blend onto that using some Distress Oxide inks. The first shade that I'm using is Saltwater Taffy, so I'm blending that on about the bottom third of this panel. And just making sure I have a nice bit of color on there. And then I'm going to switch to my middle shade, which is going to be Kitsch Flamingo. So I'm going to bring that over the center and blend that right down over the top edge of that Saltwater Taffy so that I get a blend that is really nice and smooth between those two. I want to have a good transition from shade to shade, especially since that Saltwater Taffy is a bit more peach toned. So I just want it to be seamless between those. And then my final shade is Picked Raspberry. So I'm going to add that one up at the top, making sure to really darken up the edges at the top so I get a nice bit of contrast there. And I'm going to bring that down into the Kitsch Flamingo. So I have about a third of that panel once again. And then once I'm happy with the amount of color that I have on there, I'm going to go back to my Kitsch Flamingo blending tool and just go over that transition area one more time. So then I'm ready to start adding my splatter detail, and the first thing I'm going to do is using Lawn Fawn Liquid Stardust, and I'm going to add that to an acrylic block and then tap it off the edge with a thin paintbrush. Now when you're looking head on, this doesn't show up that much, it's really subtle, but when you tip the card into the light, you see these flashes of like this pearlized shine that are just so pretty. So next I'm going to go in with the Saltwater Taffy. So I'm going to add a bit of water to that and make that nice and fluid and tap that all over the background as well. I really like when the lighter speckles end up in the darker sections of the panel because it just adds that bit of contrast on there that I love so much. Then I'm going to add a little bit of that Kitsch Flamingo, doing the same thing, just tapping that off so I get a nice fine spray of dots. I don't want any big globs. And then I'm going to go in with the final shade, which is the Picked Raspberry. So I'll just add that on the end and splatter that all over the background as well. So if you would just like flick that paintbrush at the cardstock without tapping it, you would get much bigger blobs. So if that's the look you're going for, that's definitely an option. So there is that finished panel. I'm going to set that aside to dry. And I wanted to share the Distress Oxides that I used on the boy version just in case you wanted to make that one for yourself. So at the bottom I used Tumbled Glass, the middle was Salvage Patina, and then the top was Stormy Sky. I created a standard A2 size card base using Lawn Fawn sticky note cardstock, and I'm stamping on the inside using Lawn Fawn sunflower ink, and I'm stamping on the little bear from this same Little Star stamp set and a sentiment that says "Welcome little one." And because it's yellow on yellow, I am stamping that down a whole bunch of times to make sure that that's going to show up. Now that my background panel is dry, I'm going to take the new Starry Sky die and run that through my die cutting machine to cut out all of those beautiful stars. And there are a couple places where that die kind of embossed into my cardstock just because my sandwich is pretty tight. So I'm using a bone folder, a Teflon bone folder, so it doesn't leave shiny marks, to just smooth those back out so you can't even see them. And then I'm going to add some Bearly Art Precision Craft Glue to the back of this panel, just going around all of those little stars, laying down a nice thin bead of glue, and then even between some so I can make sure that it is really well adhered. Then I'm going to line that up on the card front and just make sure it is on there nice and straight before I smooth that down into place. And I wanted those stars to be a bit more dynamic to kind of match the rest of the coloring. So I'm going to go back to the Y02 and also a Y06, and I'm just adding a little bit of dot detail in the center of each of these stars. Well, actually it's more toward like the bottom right side of each of these stars, and just kind of bringing them to life a little bit more so that they kind of hold up to the rest of the cute coloring and all of the dot detail we did on everything else, even the splatter on the background. So I used the Y06 first, and then I'm coming in with a little bit of the Y02, which is just going to help it blend into the rest of that cardstock a bit more. So just quickly going over that, not being too precise about it. It really doesn't have to be perfect because some of these are even going to be covered up by the images later on, but I just wanted there to be a little extra something there. So now I'm going to bring in the boy version again so that I can add my images in the same position on the card. So one thing is that if you want a different look, you can flip that Starry Sky background upside down. So I did that on the girl version. You can see that the stars are not in the exact same place as they are on the boy card. That's just because the die went through the opposite way. So I'm going to get my images positioned where I want them, and that way I can carefully tuck behind the images that need to go behind, which is the moon and then also the little bird, because I wanted his feet to be tucked behind the head of the little bunny. And then I can pick up that large image and add some liquid glue to the back of that as well. And I accidentally dropped it, but thank goodness it landed glue side up. So no harm, no foul. So I'm going to add that down to the card front as well. Then for the sentiment, I'm going to take the Oh Baby Words die, which is also from this brand new Hello Bluebird release, and die cut that out of some MFT Poppin' Pink cardstock. And then I'm going to use my reverse tweezers to hang onto that so that I can position it on the card and get my glue on the back of that using that fine tip on the Barely Art Precision Craft Glue. I should have put the O just a little bit higher than I did, or I should have laid them both out before I glued them down because I didn't have it quite right. I thought I had it lined up pretty well at the same level as the boy version, but maybe the elephant was just slightly higher on the boy version. Whatever reason, the word baby didn't quite fit without the words overlapping just a tiny bit. In the end, it's not really a big deal. I just wanted them to be the same. So yeah, it didn't really fit without touching. So I added the word baby, and then I tried to peel back up the word O, but it was way too late. It was ripping and leaving behind some of that cardstock. That glue does dry super duper fast. So I had to just leave it, and I think it's completely fine. You can still read the words, no problem. So to finish off this card, I'm going to add a bit of sparkle using my favorite Stardust Stickles. It's basically just a clear glitter glue that has a bit of like a holographic shimmer in it. So it lays so beautifully over whatever you put it over, but it has this gorgeous sparkle when you tip it in the light. So I'm adding that to the moon and then also on the cloud, just in all the places where those deepest shadows are. It's going to stand out the most there and really look dynamic. So just adding that all over. It's quite a bit of glitter on today's card, but I think a starry sky kind of calls for a bit of sparkle. And because I just couldn't resist, I decided to add it to some of the stars as well, just mainly the bigger ones because, you know, twinkle, twinkle, little star, they've got to twinkle, right? So I just felt like it was perfect. So I'm going to pick that up so you can see how it looks, tip it into the light. You can see that liquid stardust on that background and then all of that Stardust Stickles. And then I'll give you another peek at the inside. I kept the inside for both of these exactly the same. I felt like that was perfect for either a boy or a girl with the yellow background and that sweet little bear. So I hope you guys enjoyed these today. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I love chatting with you guys. Subscribe if you haven't already. Ring that notification bell so you're always alerted when I post a new video, which is every Monday and Friday. If you're interested in any of these products, I'll have everything listed and linked for you in the description bar below. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.